The house stood alone, a dark shape against the white snow. Winter had a tight grip on everything. The wind howled outside, it rattled the windows. I pulled my sweater tighter. I was supposed to be dog-sitting. It felt more like I was trapped. Inside, a fire crackled in the fireplace. It did little to chase away the chill or the feeling that something was off. The silence of the house was unnerving. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I tried to shake off the feeling. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down I knew it was something more. At first, I was excited. Alone in a big house, it felt like a mini vacation. I imagined movie nights, sleeping in late, no one to tell me what to do, but that excitement was fading fast, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. The silence was too much. I wandered from room to room. The dog, a big lazy Labrador, trailed behind me. I tried to focus on him. His presence was reassuring, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes followed my every move. The first strange occurrence happened that night. I was reading, curled up on the sofa. The dog slept at my feet. A noise made me look up. It was soft, like someone whispering. I strained to hear. The sound seemed to come from the hallway, just outside the living room door. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe the old house settling, but my heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I called the dog's name. He didn't even stir. His sleep was too deep, or maybe he heard it too, whatever it was. The next morning, I found the basement door open. It was wide open. I could see the rickety wooden steps leading down into the darkness. My stomach dropped. I distinctly remembered closing it the night before. There was no way it could have opened on its own. My first thought was the dog. Maybe he had nudged it open, but he was too big to have gotten past without knocking over the paint cans stacked nearby. I checked the floor. There were no footprints, nothing but dust and cobwebs. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The feeling of unease intensified. I tried to rationalize it, blamed it on the isolation, the old house, my overactive imagination, but then things started to move. Not big things, small, almost unnoticeable things. A book left on the coffee table was now on the shelf. A mug I left in the sink was on the counter. I questioned my sanity. Had I always been this disorganized? Or was something else at play? Something I couldn't explain? The line between reality and my imagination was blurring. Fear was a constant companion. It clung to me like a shadow. And one night I woke to the sound of the alarm. It was blaring. Panic surged through me. I jumped out of bed. The dog, sensing my fear, started barking. I raced to the bedroom door. It was locked from the outside. I rattled the handle. Nothing. I was trapped. My heart pounded in my ears. I could barely breathe. How was it possible? The only window was too high to reach. Panic turned to terror. I was trapped with whatever was in the house with me. Thankfully, the alarm stopped as abruptly as it started. I managed to force the lock. I found my phone and called my friend. She lived nearby. Her voice on the other end was calming. I told her about the door, the alarm, the strange occurrences. To my surprise, she didn't dismiss it as my imagination. She sounded worried. "That's strange," she said. "I was dog-sitting there a few months ago. Weird things happened to me too. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone in this." My friend came over immediately. We searched the house together, every nook and cranny, but we found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no explanation for the locked door, or the moving objects, or the whispers in the night. We tried to come up with logical explanations, maybe a faulty wiring system, kids playing pranks, the wind, but deep down we both knew it was something more, something we couldn't explain, something unsettling. The rest of my time at the house was filled with a nervous tension. Every creak and groan sent shivers down my spine. I didn't sleep well. The shadows seemed to hold secrets, secrets they whispered in the dead of night. I was relieved when the homeowners returned, but even as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving something behind, something dark and unknown. I still think about that house sometimes. The isolation, the strange occurrences. I still don't have an explanation. Was it a haunting or something more sinister, like someone had been living there unseen, watching, waiting for the house to be empty again? The thought sends chills down my spine. I'll never know for sure, but one thing is certain, I'll never forget my time in that house and the unseen guest that shared it with me.